Today is Sunday, July the 2nd, 2017. This is James Robert Deal. Please tell your friends that James Robert Deal is running for Lynnwood City Council, Position 1. And tell them to go to jamesrobertdeal.org/radio. You can send an email to james@jamesdeal. I keep my email window open here. You can also call 425-774-6611 if you want to participate. I'm going to let you listen to one more song before we jump in.
To you too. Hey, big government, I'm talking to you too. Do unto others applies to all. Hey, Monsanto, where's your code? Your code of ethics, you should have one. Hey, you fraudulent seller of carcinogenic Roundup, Monsanto, where's your code? Profits must be goal number 2 after doing something good for the world. Hey, ExxonMobil, look up, not down, to solar and wind and wave. Stop drilling now, the future is green. Be a big green energy company. Hey, ExxonMobil, stop your fracking ways. Your methane is even worse than your CO2. Quit poisoning the waters, quit poisoning the air. Be a big green energy company. Profits must be goal number 2 after doing something good for the world. Hey, Shell Oil, how much did you spend? $8 billion in the Chukchi Sea. You left, you said there was no oil, but really there's a lot. It was Mother Nature's storms that drove you off. And $8 billion could build enough solar, would build enough solar to power 200,000 homes. Profits must be goal number 2 after doing something good for the world. Polluting the world is not only morally wrong, long term it makes absolutely no financial sense. You can make a tidy profit without fracking up the world. Do unto others applies to all. Hey, cattle rancher, take your beefs off the public land. Give the buffalo and the wolf a place to roam. Profits must be goal number 2 after doing something good for the world. Do unto others applies for our descendants, our duty to those billions yet unborn. Our sons and our daughters for the next 10,000 years. Do unto others applies for all. So do unto our Mother Earth as you would have her. Do for your grandchildren. This is James Robert Deal. Today is December 26th, 2016.
And December 26th, 2016 is when I recorded the song. Today is July the 2nd. This is James Robert Deal, candidate for Lynnwood City Council, Position 1. So I'm the unconventional candidate. I think the other candidates want to talk about whether the Lynnwood Fire Department should be merged with a larger South County Fire Department for sake of efficiency. I haven't decided what my position is on that issue, and that's the way I do. If I haven't decided, I let you know. I'm still thinking about it. I'm looking at bigger issues like the systematic poisoning of our whole population by a massive fraud. Now, you've read about Scott Pruitt and how he's rolling back EPA regulations, and the biggest one currently is chlorpyrifos, which is a chlorine and fluoride-based, phosphate-based poison that's sprayed on strawberries and on broccoli and numerous other vegetables. It doesn't wash off, and it's internal, and so peeling it doesn't help, and it is exceedingly harmful, especially to children, fetuses. So the EPA is a very weak organization, and so what happens is that it has basically parties inside of it. It has a pro-consumer party and a pro-industry party, and the pro-industry party is usually in control. The EPA has the power to ban fluoride in drinking water, but it has not done so. The FDA has power to ban fluoride in drinking water, but has not done so, because the pro-industry faction within the EPA has always been in charge. Now the FDA has done, because fluoride is put in the water and the intent is to prevent disease, it therefore falls under the jurisdiction of the FDA. And so there's some argument over whether the EPA has jurisdiction over it or the FDA or the FDA. Either could ban it. Only the FDA could authorize it because it is a drug. But the EPA took it on itself to turn over the approval of fluoridation to a trade group known as NSF, the National Sanitation Foundation. The National Sanitation Foundation goes back many years, but it started in the 30s or 40s regulating chemicals used in commercial dishwashers in restaurants. So the EPA finances the NSF and has wrote some guidelines for it. The NSF does not certify that fluoride in drinking water is safe and effective. It only certifies that it's safe, but it fails to follow its own guidelines. the guidelines say that the concentration of fluoride has to be less than 10% of the maximum contaminant level as set by the EPA. The maximum contaminant level for fluoride in drinking water was 4 parts per million and remains 4 parts per million, even though the National Science Council in 2006, in their 10-year reevaluation of the fluoridation policy, told the EPA that the maximum contaminant level of 4 parts per million was too high and should be lowered. Instead of lowering the 4.0 parts per million maximum contaminant level, the EPA just lowered its recommended level of fluoridation from 1 part per million to 0.7 parts per million. But 0.7 parts per million is still higher than 0.4 parts per million, which is 1/10 of 4.0 parts per million, which is the maximum contaminant level. So, each state, pretty much all the states, have adopted regulations which say that fluoridation may be carried on provided that fluoridation complies with NSF Rule 60. And NSF Rule 60 says that fluoride can be added to water at no more than 10% of the maximum contaminant level. Washington has such a law. Fluoridation is being done at 0.7 parts per million. That exceeds 0.4 parts per million. So fluoridation in the state of Washington, most states in the United States, most provinces in Canada, and many countries which follow the NSF rule is illegal. So I had a running debate with Governor Inslee about this. I put in an application for a rule change, and it went all the way up to Governor Inslee, who is the Supreme Court when it comes to deciding on the validity of regulations. And he had one of his underlings prepare a letter for him that just summarily denied my petition. So go to jamesrobertdeal.org and search for Inslee, and you'll find a series of letters that went back and forth. So what's so bad about fluoridation? Everything. Nothing can be said about ingesting fluoride or putting it on your skin or taking showers in it or cooking with it. The body needs potassium, magnesium, calcium. And it needs other minerals, but it has no need whatsoever for fluoride. Fluoride is, or fluorine is not involved in any biological process whatsoever. But a crackpot theory was evolved in the early 1900s with the encouragement of Alcoa, and it came out of bauxite mines in Arkansas. And in Colorado there was a doctor, a dentist, who noticed that children who had dental fluorosis tended to have lower tooth decay, lower levels of tooth decay. The thing that was wrong with his conclusion was that it was not the fluoride in the Colorado water that was good for the teeth. It was the high levels of calcium and magnesium in the water, which strengthened teeth in spite of the mottling, the dental fluorosis that was occurring. Dental fluorosis is now an epidemic in teenage children. By that age, over 50% of our children have some degree of dental fluorosis. Some of it is barely noticeable. Some of it is mild to moderate. But if the teeth are being modeled, then all the bones in the body are being modeled. And this poisoning of the bones continues throughout your life. Fluoride loves calcium. They link up and form a very strong covalent bond. The fluoride that your kidneys can't excrete goes into your bones. And the pH inside your bones is alkaline. Fluoride cannot be separated from calcium unless the pH is acidic. And the interior part of the bone is never going to be acidic, which means that the 1/2 of the fluoride that the kidneys cannot excrete goes permanently into your bones, accumulates lifetime. So by the time you're in your 70s, you're a sick person. Your bones are weak, the bones become heavier, but they become more brittle. So you hear about old ladies who break their hip and fall down. Note, I did not say that they fall down and break their hip. They break their hip and fall down. The porous, the brittle hip bone is the one that's easy to break because so much weight is put on it. Also, fluoride transports aluminum across the blood-brain barrier. Your stomach is very acidic, and in your acidic stomach, aluminum and fluoride will combine. We eat a lot of aluminum, but we excrete it very well. But the fluoride will bind with the aluminum, forming a very small, neutral, no-charge molecule that can slip through the fatty lipid layer in the stomach and get into the bloodstream and get into the brain. And I just received an email from attorney Alan Phillips, who is a vaccine rights attorney. And let me open up my email here and just see what Alan says. He says, I like the idea of suing for chemtrail polluting. U.S. airspace is a federal jurisdiction, but probably only above a certain height. So perhaps a local government couldn't do anything about planes directly, but about the pollution on the ground, yes. So I use a program called Spreaker, SPREAKER.com, to do my radio broadcasts, and I find it very convenient. And but let me switch the subject back to fluoridation. Let me reply to Alan here and say, Alan, make sure you go to jamesrobertdeal.org/radio. Alan, go to jamesrobertdeal.org/radio. Right now, I am live. Now, if you want to make a comment, you can call 425-774-6611. Or you can send an email to james@jamesdeal.com. Send. Okay, maybe we can get him on the line. His strong suit is that the CDC-approved vaccines are not double-blind tested. Instead of comparing the vaccines against saline solution, they're compared against, for example, the measles vaccine. They will run tests against measles vaccine minus the antivirus antibodies, but with all the same adjuvants in it, like aluminum, and then say, oh, there's no difference in the A and B tests, so therefore it's okay. And they'll only run it for a short period of time. So double-blind testing is not being done with vaccines. Now, I must admit that a city council person has no jurisdiction over vaccine administration, but I will educate people and say that our vaccine program is totally out of control, and err on the side of not vaccinating. But back to the fluoride issue. All of our water comes from Spada Lake, which is a huge, deep mountain lake up to the north of Sultan. You go up Highway 2, and you can visit the water plant and take a tour. You can't take pictures, you can't run videos, but I ran an audio recording, and that's on fluorideclassaction.com. Go there and do a search for Spada Lake, S-P-A-D-A, and you'll find that tour. It's a very impressive facility, except for the final step in the process, which is the fluoridation room. We actually walked through the fluoridation room, and the glass in the windows was frosted because the hydrogen fluoride in the air was present. And so as soon as I walked in there and took a breath, I could smell this stench, and it actually hurt my lungs. And so I held my breath and exited rapidly. I went outside, took a lot of deep breaths, held my breath, and went back inside to look at what was being shown. The city of Everett spent a lot of money because the fluoride injection room had broken down and had to be replaced at great expense. So that's why many cities stop fluoridating, because it corrodes the pipes. We get all of our water from Spada Lake, which is a system controlled by Everett, and it is a huge water system. It provides water to the south 3/4 of Snohomish County. I think there even supplies water as far north as Arlington, but for sure from Marysville south to the county line. Everett, Marysville, half of Snohomish is fluoridated with that water. Mukilteo, Lynnwood, Everett, Edmonds, Mount Lake Terrace, Bothell, they all receive Everett water because Everett has a massive water supply. Spada Lake gets 240 inches of rain per year. That's 20 feet of rain. Plus there's snowmelt. There's enough water there to supply probably all of western Washington. There are 4 huge pipes coming down from the water goes from Spada Lake down to Lake Chaplin, where it goes through the water treatment plant, and then in 4 gigantic pipes down to the trestle, which crosses the Snohomish River, and then to Everett, and then north and south. So the city of Lynnwood could demand that Alderwood Water District, which is the intermediary, dedicate one of those pipes to the city of Lynnwood. And there is an industrial plant in South Everett somewhere which says we don't want fluoridated water because interferes with our chemical processes. We want untreated, just water. And the Everett Water District is able to supply that industrial concern with non-fluoridated water, so it could supply Lynnwood with non-fluoridated water. The people of Everett voted many years ago in the 60s in favor of fluoridation before people really knew how harmful this practice was. Lynnwood folks never had a chance to vote on it, so the city council should stand up for our good health. Now I'm going to click back to my Spreaker console here and play a song for you. I'll be back in 1 minute. That is Johann Sebastian Bach's Minuet in G, and that's one of the first songs I learned to play. Back to the fluoride question. Fluoridation started in 1945 as pushed by the Public Health Service. The Public Health Service at that time was a department of the military and pretty well got away with whatever it wanted to get away with. The federal government took extraordinary measures to develop the bomb and brushed aside all caution in doing so and left enormous amounts of toxic waste at Oak Ridge in Tennessee and at Hanford in Washington, and took the same approach to fluoridation, was pushing the fluoridation of a test city in Michigan, and also there was a testing done in an Ontario city. Just got another email from Alan Phillips. Thank you, Alan. He says I have a great speaking voice. Thanks. So, fluoridation began without prior approval by the FDA. The FDA at that time was a fairly weak agency and was apparently intimidated by the Public Health Service. So, the test was done. It was supposed to last for 5 years or 10 years. And before it was completed, fluoridation was declared to be a success. Results which would indicate it was bad for health were covered up. And it was off to the races. So fluoridation spread, was instituted in the largest cities. And pretty soon there wasn't enough fluoride. So fluoridation started with sodium fluoride. Sodium fluoride is produced in the production of uranium, in the production of aluminum, and it's a little bit cleaner than fluorosilicic acid, but it's more expensive, and it typically comes in a salt form, a solid form, and today it's still used in some small fluoridation operations because they don't want to deal with the liquid fluorosilicic acid. The powdered salt form is a little bit less dangerous to handle, although it is dusty and you need to have your eyes completely covered and have a respirator on because you don't want to breathe any of that sodium fluoride dust. So sodium fluoride was expensive and the supply was insufficient, so the producers of fluorosilicic acid said, hey, we've got fluoride too. We want to get into this lucrative game. We can sell our toxic waste and make a profit on it instead of having to dispose of it. Well, their method of disposing of it was to put it into gigantic lagoons. This is in northern Florida. So fluorosilicic acid is produced in the production of superphosphate fertilizer, which is a totally unnecessary fertilizer. A much better practice is to take phosphate rock, grind it up into a powder, and mix it with either animal manure or vegetable manure and let it rot for 6 months to bring out all the phosphate, and then to put it on the crops. But that's a little bit too much trouble. It's much more convenient to spray the superphosphate fertilizer onto the crops. And most soil has sufficient phosphate. It can be unlocked by changing the pH of the soil. So these giant lagoons got deeper and deeper, so the fluorosilicic acid forms, as it evaporates, forms pebbles, nice white little pebbles. And so the pebbles would be bulldozed into walls that got higher and higher, and these walls surrounded the lagoons. Some of these walls of pebbles can be 50 feet high. So these lagoons can be 50 feet deep. And yes, the lagoon eventually broke through into and dropped the entire load of fluorosilicic acid down into the Florida aquifer, permanently contaminating the Florida aquifer. So the fluoride we put in our water is a byproduct of an unnecessary industry that pollutes the aquifer in Florida. Much of the fluoride that we add to our water no longer comes from Florida because, again, the supply is insufficient. Instead is imported from China and from Mexico. So shit is turned into shinola. So there are many fluorides, and it is deceptive for fluoridation supporters to say that it's naturally occurring and therefore it's okay. Well, arsenic and lead are naturally occurring, and we need to avoid those as much as possible. Fluorosilicic acid contains lead, contains arsenic, cadmium, mercury, thallium, and a host of other contaminants. I've done the math. If you take the percentage of lead that's added to our water as a part of the fluorosilicic acid, you have to divide by Avogadro's number, which is a gigantic number, the number of molecules in a mole, a gram molecular weight of any substance is like 2.6 times 10 to the 23rd or 26th power. So it is a gigantic number. But my calculations are that if you fluoridate at 1 part per million, the number of atoms of lead which you're adding to your drinking water is 3 trillion atoms of lead per quart of water. It's a horrible thought. If you go to fluorideclassaction.com, fluoride-class-action.com / what is in it, what dash is dash in dash it, what is in it. You can see all my mathematical calculations. There are many fluorides. For a really good summary of this issue, I direct you to fluoride-class-action.com / safe water, and there you can get my double-sided legal size summary of the fluoridation issue. Naturally occurring fluoride is calcium fluoride and rarely magnesium fluoride. Now, calcium fluoride is common, and it's even found in small trace amounts in most well water. The Lynnwood well has a tiny amount of calcium fluoride in it. But remember that fluoride loves calcium, and when fluoride comes with its own calcium and other minerals, it's less harmful, and the body is more capable of excreting it. Then you have the sodium fluoride, which comes from the aluminum and uranium industry. And then you have fluorosilicic acid, which comes from the phosphate fertilizer industry. A lot of dentists support fluoridation, but a lot of dentists oppose it. The dentists fall into 3 categories. Some dentists are uncritical supporters of fluoride in any form and in pretty much any amount. They support it in the drinking water. If it's in the drinking water, it's also in your food. Any food made with fluoridated water. It's in your soda, your beer. It's also in your clothes. You wash your clothes in fluoridated water and you put them through the dryer or hang them out in the sun. The water evaporates, but the fluoride stays in your clothes. So as you go about your day perspiring, you have a bath of fluoride against your skin, which you absorb into your skin. Pregnant mothers drinking fluoridated water pass the fluoride into their fetus. And Harvard studies confirm that fluoridated water is linked to lower IQ. Wow, time flies, doesn't it? I'm going to take a short break here. So I'm going to play a 4-minute song. And I hope you like it. It's my version of the Lord's Prayer. I've never liked the conventional Lord's Prayer songs. Don't like the melody particularly, and I think that there's a line that was omitted. There are 3 versions of the Lord's Prayer. 2 in the New Testament, 1 in the Didache, and in translation I theorize that 1 line was lost. And that would be in the phrase that says, "Give us this day our daily bread." I think the line that was dropped out was, "as we share with those in need." If you read the book of James, who's the brother of Jesus, he stresses that we should take care of the needy. So I hope you enjoy this song. I'm going to turn down the microphone and turn up the recorded music and then let her rip for 4 minutes. So you have 4 minutes and 44 seconds to go get a sandwich.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven up above. Give us this day our daily bread, as we share with those in need. Forgive us our wrongs as we forgive others' wrongs, and may we not be tested, but if we are, may we survive the test. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. James Robert Deal, February 28th, 2017.
This is James Robert Deal, back from our break. Send an email to your friends and just say jamesrobertdeal.org/platform and jamesrobertdeal.org/radio. If you go to /radio, I will post the times when future live broadcasts will be made, and I'll save all of my broadcasts there so you can listen to them after the fact. Now, back to the subject of fluoridation. The worst thing about fluoride is actually not the fluoride itself, but the lead. As I said, there's 3 trillion atoms of lead added to your drinking water per liter or quart of water. And this all comes from the fluorosilicic acid. But there's even more lead deposited into your water because fluorosilicic acid breaks down into silicic acid, which leaches lead. The amount of alkalizer sufficient to neutralize the acidic chlorine added to the drinking water is not sufficient to neutralize the silicic acid. To neutralize the silicic acid, you would need to raise the pH to about 10, and the consistency of the water would be more like Alka-Seltzer, and that would pose problems of its own. So the silicic acid is a slow but persistent leacher of lead. Sulfuric acid doesn't dissolve lead, but so-called weak silicic acid does. Go figure. So if you want to reduce the amount of lead in your drinking water, don't fluoridate, because then you'll have less lead added and you won't have lead leaching. The proof of this on the street is in Tacoma. In 1992, the fluoridation was shut down because of problems with the water supply, and lead levels in the water dropped in half, blood lead levels dropped in half, and after about 3 months the equipment was fixed and Tacoma started fluoridating again, and the lead levels went back up. You can read about this if you go to fluorideclassaction.com/safe-water and just look for Tacoma, the Tacoma link there. And then in 2004, the Seattle newspapers started reporting that lead was present in Seattle schools at levels up to 1,600 parts per billion, which is an enormous level. The fluoridation level was 1 part per million back then, and we're talking 1,600 parts per billion is 1.6 parts per million. So there was more lead in the water than there was fluoride. And when you read the newspaper articles about it, all of this is summarized in my Safe Water article. There was not one mention of the possibility that the fluoride could be the cause of the lead leaching. So at great expense, the Seattle schools, they either decommissioned their drinking fountains and brought in bottled water, or they replaced all the pipes. So there's less lead in school drinking water. Probably only the amount of lead that's introduced directly as part of the fluoride itself. Solving or reducing the problem in the schools, but doing nothing about the lead leaching in homes, in businesses, in apartments. It put a Band-Aid on a problem that needed surgery. And let's talk a little bit about Flint. And you can go to jamesrobertdeal.org/Flint or fluorideclassaction.com/Flint and read about this tragic tale. So what happened in Flint was that Flint was importing Detroit water. Detroit water comes from Lake Michigan, and it's fairly clean except for the fluoride that's added, but they also add chlorine to kill bacteria, and these two acid-forming substances leach lead from pipes. Chlorine, to some extent, leaches lead from pipes. So then Flint switched as a money-saving measure to Flint River water, which contained a lot of vegetable matter and maybe animal waste. So they added excessive amounts of chlorine to try to clean up the water, and the excessive amounts of chlorine as a lead leacher caused the lead in the pipes to be released, and the city of Flint continued to fluoridate. So they had two chemicals that were lead leaching chemicals, and in this case they had excessive amounts of chlorine. So they still haven't learned their lesson. Flint switched back to Detroit water, which is still chlorinated and still fluoridated, and it's still leaching lead from their pipes. And I should point out to you that there's lead in almost all of our plumbing systems. The older plumbing systems, the more lead in it. My old home back in Mount Lake Terrace had a lead service line. It was built in the early 60s. Lead is soft and easy to work with. And if you run neutral pH water through it, then you don't get too much lead leaching. But when you run chlorine and fluoride through it, you're going to get lead leaching. Now, inside the house, you're going to have galvanized pipe, and galvanized pipe will soak up the lead and then release it later. Then when you get to your water faucet, most brass fixtures contain 8% lead, unless you're following California standards, where the allowable lead in brass used for water faucets is a very tiny level. Fluoride makes metals flow. It's FLUO, and it's used to make aluminum, steel, gasoline, uranium, hexafluorosilicic, what's the gas that if you want to purify uranium, you turn it into a gas made of fluorine and uranium. So your faucets and your brass plumbing sit overnight and accumulate the lead, and the first draw of water is really heavily laden with lead. Also, if you've got expensive plumbing, copper water pipes, you got to bear in mind that they are soldered together using copper lead solder. Also bear in mind that old water mains contain lead. The old water mains are cast iron. However, these big cast iron pipes need to be joined together. Well, how do you do that? What you do is you build a plywood frame around the joint, and then you pour in the molten lead, and it fills in all the cracks and crevices in the join. So now you have water mains that contain lead, and you're running fluoride through them, which leaches the lead. In my Flint article, I've written speculatively and extensively about the possibility, about a solution to this. Of course, removing all the lead from the pipes should be the ultimate goal. And in Japan, all water pipes, water mains, water fixtures are stainless steel, which is what we should be using. It costs more, harder to work with. But we shouldn't be trifling about our health, because fluoride, from the time of conception on, is attacking our health. But the solution that I proposed is to completely eliminate or to greatly reduce the use of chlorine, eliminate the introduction of fluoride, and instead use ozonation. Ozonation would be used at the water plant, and it's much better than chlorine, because ozonation, and it's much better than using aluminum at the water plant. Aluminum is used because it causes all of the dirt to clump together. It's a flocculant. And then you use mechanical means to filter it out. Well, ozonation is also a flocculant, and then the water can be run through mechanical filters to filter out the dirt and all the contaminants that come with the dirt. And you eliminate the need for chlorine. So the water would leave the water plant either slightly chlorinated or not chlorinated at all. And the water would then be transported many miles, probably 30 miles, in one of these big pipes to Lynnwood, where there would be another ozonation facility. And you'd need multiple ozonation facilities because ozone does its job, kills bacteria, neutralizes contaminants, and most of these pipes have holes in them. Can't eliminate all of the leakage in and out, so that you would need ozonation equipment out in the neighborhoods. Another alternative is not to ozonate, but in each home have UV radiation as a tool to kill the bacteria. So there are other solutions, and we need pure water. I should say something about toothpaste. Fluoridated toothpaste is one monumental scam. The toothpaste contains 1,500 parts per million fluoride, and whatever you don't spit out, whatever stays on your teeth, you eventually swallow. It doesn't stay there for long. And while it's in your mouth, you're absorbing it through your tissues, the soft tissues in your mouth. So, among the opponents of fluoridation, there are those who say, let's just oppose water fluoridation. Let's don't come out against fluoride toothpaste and fluoride use in the dentist's office, because let's deal with one vice at a time. The problem with that approach is that it sends a mixed message. It gives topically applied fluoride a pass and implies that it's somehow safe and effective. But fluoride in toothpaste washes away very quickly as soon as there's any kind of food you eat which is even slightly acidic. It doesn't bind with the enamel, because the enamel is a glass. It's silica, and it forms a thin coating of calcium fluoride, which is easily washed away when the pH is a little bit acidic, and you swallow it. Now, dentists can be deceived like anybody else. And the people they respect back at dental school supported fluoridation. And the lie is easy to propagate because it does sound attractive. It's like a quick and dirty way to prevent tooth decay. But fluoride is not really very good at killing bacteria. Iodine is a much better bacteria killer. In fact, once a week I put several drops of Lugol's 2% iodine, Lugol, on my toothbrush, and I brush with Lugol's iodine, because iodine kills Streptococcus mutans dead immediately. And you can't say that about fluoride. The action that fluoride has is that it is an enzyme interrupter. It just makes the Streptococcus sick, just like it interferes with enzyme action in your body. It's not immediately fatal. It just makes you sick, a little bit sick. It makes you a little bit anemic. And it is a toxic substance in general. Now, another problem with fluoridation is that most of the fluoride is not, most of the water that comes through your house is not consumed as drinking water or as cooking water. Most of it gets flushed down the toilet and goes down the shower and goes through your dishwasher and goes through your sink when you wash your hands and continues on to the treatment plant and then is released into the ocean, the Puget Sound, or into the Snohomish River. And so you then measure the fluoride levels in the river. And the fluoride levels in the Snohomish River are at times high enough that they affect the salmon. Salmon are very sensitive to fluoride. There are 4 cities that dump their fluoridated, treated wastewater into the Snohomish River: Monroe, Snohomish, Everett, and Marysville. And we have had salmon crashes on the Snohomish River. This was documented in a study done back in the 70s regarding the Alcoa aluminum plant, which was near the John Day Dam in Oregon. And the whole salmon run was failing. It was found that salmon are sensitive to fluoride at levels down to 0.2 parts per million. And the quick and dirty reason is that salmon, as an anadromous fish, when they're living in salt water, have to excrete salt. But once they start living in fresh water, they need to absorb salt, and fluoride forms salts with other minerals and is easily absorbed into the salmon, where it kills important bacteria in the stomach of the salmon, and the salmon die. They just can't handle it. Now, the people who support fluoridation cite studies that say that fluoride in drinking water reduces tooth decay by 18 to 25%. You know, they don't say that it eliminates tooth decay 100%. So to get a small reduction in tooth decay, we inflict the harmful aspects of fluoride and the lead leaching on the whole population. Most of Europe doesn't fluoridate, and their reduction in tooth decay over time has been just as significant as in the United States. It's better hygiene, it's better diet. We all need to supplement vitamin D 6 months a year, especially here in the Northwest where there's little sun. Most of us are vitamin D deficient. That would do far more to help your teeth than fluoride. Well, we've been talking, you've been listening for over an hour, and it's a nice sunny Sunday. So I'm going to go out with one of my favorite songs here. It is a 8-minute song. So listen as long as you'd like. And tell your friends, send emails, jamesrobertdeal.org/radio, which gives a link to all the other aspects of my campaign. You can go to jamesrobertdeal.org/platform. Click on the link to the PDF, print out my flyers, hand them out to your friends, forward it by email to your friends. And thanks for listening.
truth you may find. I hope there is a God above. I pray there is no devil. I hope there is a heaven. I pray there is no hell. Some may be deserving of punishment infernal. May they be punished no more and no less. Some may be deserving of retirement in heaven. If I am so lucky, my hope is to play the big pipe organ. Greenland will melt, Antarctica too. Oceans will rise, our cities will be undersea attractions. A comet will fall into Atlantic, tsunami cross Pacific, will overtop the coastal nukes, plutonium catch fire and burn. Once alight, those nukes will burn for 1,000 years. We will live underground, come out only in hazmat. The sun in solar maximum will send us a mass ejection. Electronics will be toasted and we will return to the 1800s. You may say it's unlikely, but such things have happened before. Unlikely things that have happened before will eventually happen again. Life is a tragedy, said an ancient sage. A tragedy to those who feel, but a comedy to those who think. So I've thought, and I've thought about it often, about taking my own life. The thing that has kept me going is knowing I'll be dead soon enough. I was sitting by her side when my mother died at 90. Dying won't be so bad, she said. In heaven I can smoke if I want. Follow your truth, she would say, wherever it leads you, and do not fear the truth you